Hey, welcome to episode 8 of Worth 1000 Words, where I attempt to write a 1,000 word short story based on a piece of artwork. If you're new here, my name is Jason, and I'm a fiction writer. And today, I am joined by Black Phillip from The Witch to guide my hand with the accompaniment of The Witch soundtrack by Mark Corvin. So without wasting any more time, let's check out the artwork. Today's artwork is titled Witch Hunt by Aaron Arik, a freelance concept artist and illustrator from Istanbul, Turkey. Funny story, I found a thumbnail of his on ArtStation that caught my eye. It's not the one I used, but that took me to his profile where I remembered the name. I did a short story collection a while back for an RPG setting, and the editor of that collection hired him, this was years ago, as a concept artist to kickstart one of his RPG campaigns on Kickstarter. So I'm happy to see he's still cranking out artwork. His work is much improved. It was great back then. It's even better now. And I can see him utilizing 3D software as well into his concept art. But this one really drew me in. It has a lot of action in it, definitely in media res. And you see these poor women hanging from nooses in the background. And we have a lone woman being dragged to that same fate. It's very sketchy. I love artwork like this where it's not totally defined. It just helps your mind fill in the blanks and create a sense of atmosphere, and it really speaks to the skill of the artist to be able to convey a story with so few brushstrokes. So I'm excited for this one. I'm sure the soundtrack is going to help me out here. Thanks, Aaron, for providing the artwork, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you continue to produce. Let's move on to the writing. Even though the woman in the foreground is visibly struggling, I wanted to make her the protagonist, and here I mentioned she's not struggling, and I go back a bit and illustrate that somewhat as it being a charade. But I went back and forth a little bit. Do I go from the perspective of the guy in the front, or one of the other people, or maybe one of the girls or the women who are hanging from the trees? But immediately I thought, I know what I have to do. It didn't take me long. I needed to make this a tale where the bad person wins, I guess, depending on your perspective. And here you can see where I'm illustrating the fact that she's giving them a little bit of fight just so they don't think something's up. She wants them to know that she fears them, or at least she wants them to think that she fears them. And here's when I start seeding the idea that she has a plan they couldn't know, not yet. And I noticed these two dogs off to the side, and one has its muzzle in the mud, and I really didn't know where I was going with this. I just thought they're in the image and I wanted to include them somehow. And I decide here that it is something, the hand of one of the girls. And this is a little bit of backstory, a little bit of exposition here, just to try to fill in somewhat of what happened. So these women were obviously captured and taken. It's called Witch Hunt. And I decided that one of the women almost escaped, but alas, the sun gave her away. And here I'm going back and forth about the guy in the lead, the cloaked man, as I'm calling him. I give him a proper name here, but quickly I decide to, I believe in the next paragraph even, give him a name or a title. Not quite yet. Still cloaked man. And here I'm establishing his power, the command that he has with these two dogs, and presumably everyone. And then I bring attention to the rope at his side, and the woman in the foreground realizes that it's the one for her. Could be a whip, but I decide it's a rope. And here she can't help but admire the beauty that he's looking at here. It's almost like these god rays are coming down through this dark forest and illuminating what he had done. So I think at this part, she's somewhat in the same headspace as him. So I'd add a little bit of dialogue. There's not much dialogue in this whole piece. I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to hold the dialogue mostly till the end, which you'll see. And here she learns his name or title, and I guess presumably title, as a reverend. And this gives her an idea, or at least she knows that she can possibly have some power over them. Because if you haven't guessed already, she's a witch. And here I'm kind of anthropomorphizing their bowels. I wasn't sure if I wanted to get super violent here or what, but I end up, well, you'll see. I don't want to quite give it away yet. And here he's still mesmerized by the dead bodies of these women in the sunlight. And she's admiring them, and now closer. And here we see that the men give her a punch, but she's unaffected, but once again keeping the charade going that she feels pain and is at their mercy. And the Rev begins to speak finally. But she has a little fight to her. She's not quite giving in yet. Probably sizing up the situation and figuring out what she needs to do. And here I decided to make her less human, I guess I should say, than these women. So I had her clearly observing the emotions of these women and sort of the expectations these men had for their prisoners. And she wanted to make sure she fit in. Because, perhaps she needed time to do what she needs to do or escape or whatever happens. And finally we see Rev. And he's handsome, young, clean, at least on his face. And there's the inspired line from my shirt. And finally she fights back. Now, does she know what she needs to do now? Does she have the power to do what she needs to do now? Or is this still a charade to appear as though she is just like the other women? But here I am at over halfway, so I need to start moving the scene forward toward the climax. The old midpoint. Always take note of the midpoint when things need to start to shift. It's a really good marker for your writing if you're trying to hit a certain word count, or even if you're writing a large manuscript. Things have to start going a certain way at some point. And here he slowly mops up the spit on his face. Not too alarmed by it. I think it's somewhat of a cliched scene you've probably seen in plenty of movies. I guess it could have been worse. I could have had him lick it or something. But I wanted to keep him calm. I didn't want him to make him gross or crude or anything like that. And here are the final words. Give her wings, which I'm sure you can guess means string her up. And here I describe the disgusting nature of these two men that are working for him. It's almost as if they know she's not a witch, right? They're physically attracted to her, either by the violence or being close to her. And clearly one man here, it's pretty obvious what he's thinking about. But it doesn't matter to these guys. They're just following Rev's words. And here we see now that what she has been waiting for is finally here. She's getting some kind of power, or from nature, from above, from below. And there's a mark here from the Reverend. He's doing a religious sign, perhaps a prayer. But the word she hears from the forest is, it rose and rose and rose. And then finally let her fly. And she's strung up by now, gravity taking over. And he kept his word. He did not turn. Really close to 1,000. I know I need to wrap it up right here. Not too many words left. Wasn't a ton of editing on this. Luckily, thankfully, I felt like I was in the flow state, definitely, for this one. But he notices something, and toe and heel met resistance, meaning she's floating on air, essentially. And what I wanted to do is have her use these 3 deceased women for her power, and to use them to attack. And here I show the 2 men are already, they know what's up. They're cowards. They saw her not hanging but standing on air, and just immediately run for it. And this, you can see I'm already at 1,000. So I have to cut back a little bit. I wanted to end this with, you hear, you heard him, my loves fly. And I did. And here I was playing around with, I don't know, do I have any blood, any gore, any violence? I'm not sure. I'm 14 over. I decided against it. I like the idea that we end on a line of dialogue. Leaves it up to the reader to fill in the blanks, and I'm a huge fan of that. So right now I'm 5 words over, editing phase, looking for stuff to cut. I think I'm overall, pretty happy. Just changing some words, deleting some sentences. I'm trying to bring it down quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit, maybe 20 to 30 words below 1,000, because I know I want to clean up the ending. I want to make it a little more impactful. And I think in the end, I keep it more or less the same, but I needed an element in there to show that these women were alive again, and that she was in control of them. So I like how it ended up. I used very, very few words to convey that, I think. And that's always the goal, right? And I believe I ended at 58 minutes, so it was a good session. Not too long. Not too short. Still have yet to hit my episode 1 time of, I believe, 50 minutes. But this is close enough. I'd like to keep it at about an hour. That's a good time. So for some reason, this story just really, I'm listening to the Witch soundtrack. It's really putting me in the mood for this. I don't know. I watched the movie recently, not too long ago, and saw the image and just connected the dots. And I know it's a very different story than the movie, but it was still lingering inside me, I guess, and helped inspire the story to a degree. So I'm sitting at 11 words, and this is where I try to play with, okay, I need more information to convey they're back to life. And so here I talk about, vigor filling their flesh. But I added a touch because I wanted her to initiate the entire thing. And now I'm at 1,000 even. And I think that's it. Yeah, that is it. She didn't struggle, though she knew they wanted her to. Hands of shackles, elbows of knives, spittle dripping from sneers. More feral than the dogs they were, eyes hungry for her to whimper, to lash out, to plead. Fighting, begging, it didn't matter. That pleasure she would not give. The women had, poor girls, limp as the boughs that mourned them. Their fight was gone, the fight that had fueled the men who held her now. The only thing she gave them was the burden of weight, letting go of her body, scraps to keep them itching for more. The dogs buried their noses in the muck, ears slick against their heads. One found something, and when its muzzle revealed the prize to the other, it snapped at it. The hand of the slightest girl, cut it off herself just as dawn broke, to free herself of her chains. But she had 2 hands shackled, and the sun gave her away. The hand had been given to the dogs by the cloaked man as a plaything. Impressively, they had kept it mostly intact, only a few windows of bone visible even though miles had been traveled. Heel, the cloaked man breathed, and it was enough. The dogs stopped their game, sitting with eyes locked to his, not a tongue visible to pant despite their chests expanding with exertion. The cloaked man approached his handiwork, the final rope coiled in his hand. her rope. But he did not turn. His head tilted to the side, then up slightly. She couldn't argue with the sight. It was something to behold. Light swam through the branches, rimming the three girls who did not stir. The air was as dead as they were. Closer, the men brought her. She trudged along with them, giving them a sliver of a fight. What sane woman wouldn't at this juncture? She smells it, Rev, the one in the lead said, adjusting his slipping rifle with a shoulder shrug. Rev, a man of God, a man close to God, closer than these two, though God-fearing they were. The stench of Christ wafted from their pores, stirred in their bowels, a serpent ready to be freed. Rev didn't answer. He still admired the melancholy beauty, hung like the prizes from a hunt. They were, she supposed, prizes, but not for him. All of them, pale of flesh and soul. She could smell it heavier than the belief coming from these men, from Rev, as she was within touching distance now. Bring her, Rev said. They did, and she pulled a little harder, hard enough to earn a punch to the gut, the pain a fraction of a fraction. She had no serpent inside her. Your sisters, Rev said. They're with God now. The devil has lost their scent. It is not too late for your repentance. Theirs I held before I released it to our Lord. Are you now ready, quiet one? She didn't speak, for that was the pleasure he wanted, not the pleasure of pain, yet. A knee to the ribs she did not anticipate, and she sputtered a sob. A charade, of course. The girls, before they had died, had shown her what she needed to know. She had studied them, their quivering lips, drawn brows, tears when they squeezed their eyes shut, tears when they opened. A mechanism not unlike a well's pump. Rev asked you a question, the man behind her grunted. You best answer. Rev finally turned, beard unsullied by all the mud, face clear of lines, eyes as clear as the sky none of them had seen for days. Child, there is no shame. Let me guide thy... She spit a bucketful onto that pretty face that desperately needed to be dirtied. She thanked his patience that had given her enough time to find so much. He didn't flinch. A slow inhale, then exhale, his breath leading his hand into his cloak from which he produced a kerchief so white she squinted. Carefully he mopped up her mess. 4 strokes only it took before he folded it neatly and put it back. When she looked back up into his eyes, she noticed the rope he had been holding now leading to her neck, and she felt the weight. Her chest hitched. What power does he wield? Though you turn your back on him, Rev said, I shall not turn my back on you. He motioned to the 2 men. Give her wings. Carnal sounds came from the 2. She felt them grow hard as they pressed themselves close around her, gripping her shoulders, one man's hand going between her legs in secret. When a rope was over the branch, her weight not yet given back to her, the secret was told as the rifleman sniffed his fingers before dragging them across his lips, delicately, before plunging them into his mouth. The trees sang to her, the mud, even the air now had song. All of it carried with it the words she needed, from above, from below. Rev performed a ritual of his own, fingers marking his torso with old signs, words too low for her to hear above the ones that rose and rose and rose. Let her fly, Rev said. Her weight was given to her, to the rope. Rev did not lie. He did not turn from her, his eyes holding a sadness for her, not the sadness that had plagued the poor girls, the innocent girls, a knowing sadness. Toe and heel met resistance, though not grounded, and she spread her arms as wide as their Christ. Rev's eyes were the only thing that changed on his face, not going wide with fear, glistening, for he knew. The two men were already running, light breaks in the forest shroud, painting waving arms and kicking legs. To the girls she looked, a touch. Vigor filled their flesh, their souls, now hers. You heard him, my loves. Fly. I had a lot of fun with that one. Initially, what I wanted to do is, because the artwork was so sketchy, I wanted to kind of write it that way. I wanted it to feel similar to how I wrote the Lives by the Lake story, where the sentences were really short and tight. There wasn't a lot of exposition or description, but it just went another way. And if you have seen The Witch, and if you can read my shirt, I don't know if you can read it, there you go. I was inspired by that line, for sure. That's why I think it's important to kind of surround yourself with the atmosphere that really describes your work. Not that the shirt really matters, it's probably just in my head, but the soundtrack, so Mark Corvin, thank you. I think that really put me in the right headspace for this piece, and the artist as well. And I think the whole thing was a great marriage of inspiration for myself. I hope you had a fun time following along and listening, and maybe even inspiring you to write something of your own. So as always, keep making art. I can't wait to see what you come up with, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read this story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't add anything else, promise. Thanks again.